Chapter 14 Water. Suppose for some scarcity reason of water your family gets merely 1 bucket of water daily for a week. Imagine what would happen. Would you be able to cook food, clean utensils, wash clothes, or bathe? What are the other activities you would not be able to do? What would happen if we do not have normal supply of water for a long time? Apart from drinking, there are several activities for which we utilize water. Do you have any guess about the amount of water we use in whole day? Where do we get water from? Where do you get the water that you use? Some of you may say we draw water from a river, spring, pond, well, or a hand pump. Some others might say we get water from taps. Have you ever think where water in the taps comes from? Water that we get from taps is also drawn from a lake or a river or a well connection. It is then supplied through of pipes, homes in various ways, but ultimately all of us receive our water from the similar sources such as ponds, lakes, rivers and wells. We have inferred some of the sources of water. Where does the water come from to fill these ponds, lakes, rivers and wells? Do you know that about 2/3 of the earth is covered with water? Most of this water is in oceans and seas. The water in the oceans and seas has many salts dissolved in it. The water is saline. So it is not healthy for drinking and other domestic, agricultural, and industrial needs. You might have heard the popular lines of the poem Rime of the Ancient Mariner written by S.D. Coleridge in 1798. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink here. The poet has mentioned sorrow of sailors on a ship lost in the sea. Yet oceans play a vital get role in supplying the water that we consume. Do you find this surprising? After all, the water that we utilize is not salty. Many of us live in areas far away from the oceans. Does the water supply in these areas also depend on the oceans? How does the ocean water came into ponds, lakes, rivers and wells, which supply us water? How come the water from these sources is not saline anymore? That is where the water cycle comes in. Water cycle vanishing trick of water. How many times have you pay attention that water spilled on a floor ground dries up after some time? The water seems to vanish. In the same way, water disappears from wet clothes as they dry up. Water from wet roads, roofs and some other places also vanishes after the rainfall. Where does this water go? Do you memorize activity 6 in previous chapter in which water with salt dissolved in it was heated? What did we get? The water evaporated and the salt was left beneath. This activity gives us an idea that on heating, water changes into vapor. We also get to know from this activity that water vapor does not away the salt with it. Water vapors become a part of the air and cannot generally be seen. We also found that heating is necessary to convert water into its vapor. However, we have seen that water converts into its vapor also from the fields, roads, rooftops, and other land areas. We also discussed previously that to get salt water from the sea is left in shallow pits to let the water evaporate. From where does this water receives the heat it needs to evaporate? Let us find out. Loss of water by plants. You have learned before that plants required water to grow. Plants utilize a part of this water to make their food and store some of it in their various parts. Remaining part of this water is discharged through the plants into air as water vapor through the process of transpiration. Do you remind noticing transpiration of water by plants in activity for in earlier chapter? Water vapor enters the air through the processes of evaporation and transpiration. Is it lost forever? No, we get it back again, as we shall see. The procedure of condensation plays a vital role in fetching water back to the ground of earth. How does it happen? As we go higher from the ground layer of the earth, it gets cooler. When the air moves up, it gets cooler and cooler. At sufficient elevations, the air becomes so cool that the water vapor present in it condenses to change tiny drops of water called droplets. It is these tiny droplets that remain floating moving in air and seems to use as clouds. It so happens that many droplets of water come collectively to larger sized drops of water. Some water drops become so heavy that they starts to fall. These falling drops of water are what we call rain. In special weather conditions, it may also falls as hail or snow. Thus, water in the genre of vapor goes up into air by evaporation and transpiration, creates clouds, and then comes back to the earth's ground as rain, hail, or snow. Back to the oceans, what happens to the water that rain and snow bring to different regions of earth? Almost all land surfaces are above the level of oceans. Most of the water that falls on the land as rain and snow sooner or later goes back to the oceans. This happens in many ways. Snow on the mountains melts and converts into water. This water flows down from the mountains in the genre of fountains and rivers. Some of the water that falls down on land in the form of rain also flows in the form of rivers and fountains. Most of the rivers flow on long distances on land surface and finally fall into an ocean. However, water of several rivers flows into lakes. The water of rain also fills up the lakes, rivers, and ponds. Some part of the rainwater gets soaked by earth and feels like vanishing in the ground. Some of this water is brought back to the wind by the procedure of evaporation and transpiration. The remain seeps into the ground layer. Most of this water receives to us as groundwater. Open wells have filled by groundwater. Groundwater became source for many lakes and ponds as well. It is also this groundwater which is bring out by a hand pump or a tube well. Several hand pumps or tube wells which are used in a locality. The deeper we require to dig to find this groundwater, the decrement in the level of ground water due to overutilization is worrisome. In those regions where the land has less or no vegetation, the rainwater flows away rapidly. Flowing rainwater also takes the upper layer of the soil away with it. There are few zones where most of the land is covered with concrete. This reduces the outflow of rainwater into the land, which finally affects the availability of ground water. Now we know that water brought back to the top layer of the earth by rain, hail, or snow goes back to oceans or seas. Thus, water from the ocean and from the top layer of the earth goes into wind as vapor, returns back as rain, hail, or snow, and ultimately goes back to the oceans or seas. The diffusion of water in this way is known as the water cycle. This diffusion of water between sea and land is surface and uninterrupted process. This maintains the supply of water on ground. What if it rains heavily? The time, duration, and the quantity of rainfall differs from each and every place. In few parts of the world it rains throughout the year, while there are places where it rains merely for some days. In our country, most of the rainfall occurs at the time of the monsoon season. Rains bring relief especially after warm summer season. The sowing of several crops depends on the arrival of monsoon. However, excess of rainfall may lead to many problems. Heavy rainfall may become the season for rise in the level of water in rivers, lakes, and ponds. The water may then flows out over large areas causing floods. The crop fields, forests, villages and cities may get sinks into water. In our country, floods cause enormous harm to crops, domestic animals, property and human life. During floods, the animals living in the water also get carried away with the waters. They often get trapped on land areas and die when floodwater recedes. Rains also affect the animals living in the soil. What happens if it does not rain for a long period? Can you think what would be the situations if it does not rain in an area for a year or more? The soil begins to lose water by evaporation and transpiration. Since it is not being brought back by rain, the soil becomes waterless and dry. The level of water in ponds, rivers, and wells of the area goes down, and some of them may also become less. This may lead to the cause of drought. In drought conditions, it is difficult to get food and fodder. You might have read or listened about dryness occurring in some regions of our country or the world. Are you aware of the problems faced by the people staying in these regions? What happens to the animals and the vegetation in these situations? Try to find out about this by asking to your parents and neighbors and by studying about it from newspapers. How can we conserve water? With rising population, the demand for water is increasing day by day. You have learned that on Earth only a small fraction of water is available for consumption. This available water is also decreasing with excess usage. In many cities and villages, long queues for collect of water are a common sight. Modern lifestyle demands more amount of water. This leads to shortage of water in many parts of the world. Water should therefore be used carefully and judiciously. It should not be wasted. Domestic, industrial, agricultural, and other wastes should not be disposed into water bodies. These harmful wastes make water unfit for human consumption. Hence, we must conserve water for future use. Rainwater harvesting. One of the methods of conserving water is to collect rainwater and store it for later use. This is called rainwater harvesting. The idea behind rainwater harvesting is catch water where it falls. Rainwater does not seep in the ground in places that are covered with concrete roads and buildings. The following techniques are applied to collect rainwater in such places. 1. Rooftop rainwater harvesting. It is a traditional technique in which rainwater is collected from the rooftop and allowed to go into a storage tank through pipes. Water from the roof may contain soil and should be filtered before use. Rainwater can be directed through pipes from the rooftops to the storage pipe in the ground. From here it seeps into the soil to recharge or refill the groundwater. 2. Rainwater from the roadside goes directly into the ground into pits, trenches, dug wells, recharge shafts, etc. This can be used later.